Hello, this is a presentation of learning research presented by Sofia Nobre. Hi, my name is Sofia Nobre. I'm a student from the course of English Letters of the UFRJ. And in this video, I'll be talking about my research on English learning with the students and workers of UFRJ outside of my course. My objective here is to collect information from the learning perspective of English around the university, gathering those through interviews I did in the base of a few questions. Well, to conduct the research, I walked around the main central campuses of UFRJ, collecting data from workers, engineering students, geography students, and social science students. I approached each of them calmly and proceeded to ask them some questions for my English course assignment, which automatically made most of the interviewees frown with discomfort. I saw the uneasiness in their eyes. Initially, thinking they would have to practice their language skills, I quickly assured them that the research did not involve language use, but rather a description of the relationship with it. How did they come to touch with it? How was their learning process? How did they feel about it? How did they learn it? If they learned it, was that in their daily lives? And they soon seemed more relaxed to continue. I made a brief introduction of myself and the course of the presentation off record because I didn't want to make anyone uneasy during the activity, especially knowing the anxiety studying a language and speaking a language can generate in people. About how was I received from the people I interviewed, well, unlike some of my research colleagues, when I approached people, I was met with smiles and helpfulness, even enthusiasm as they assisted me until the end. The questions I bade my work on were divided in two parts. The first one was identification. I asked them, what's your name? What's your age? What gender do you identify with? What color gender do you identify as? Do you study at UFRJ? If yes, what course? Do you live in Rio de Janeiro? And if so, where? In which neighborhood? Which neighborhood? And also questions about their personal relation with English learning. How's your relationship with English? Did you have English classes at school? How were they? Was your school public or private? Did you take any English courses outside of school? How was the material used in those classes? How were the activities? Were they more focused on writing or listening? Do you use English at university? And in your opinion, how should English classes happen? Well, since those questions could seem a little strange for people, especially the older ones I interviewed, I took care to explain to them. And people such as Djavan, a 60-year-old man who worked at the Xerox in the Technology Center, or CT, that got quite confused and a little apprehensive when I asked about his race and gender. Javan is a 61-year-old black cisgender man, a resident of Nilopolis, and an employee of Xerox. Um, I asked him, how do you identify in terms of your gender? And there was a strange moment when I needed to try lighten the mood and explain the question, not, not to make it seem that I was questioning his masculinity. And he spoke like a feel relaxed, a cool guy. He didn't quite understand the question about, but he was a cisgender man. I asked it also, how would you identify your skin color? And he exclaimed, like, great. He exclaimed when talking about his skin color, understanding that the question was about his comfort with his black skin, and mentions that when he was younger, he was also colored as an indigenous person. Well, from the various interviews I conducted, I compiled a few interesting ones that could best describe the reality of most English classrooms in Brazil. Here I will talk about Caio, an engineering student, Javan, the Xerox employee, Ricardo, Walter, and Victoria, social science students, and Larissa, a geography student. As a result, after transcribing the interviews, I felt some curious patterns that in the learning process of them that I in the learning process of them. We start from the notion that English classrooms generate some kind of discomfort in the students. Everybody seemed oppressive, a little nervous after discovering the topic of the activity I was inviting them for was about English, except for Ricardo, who was very happy and open to talk about his experiences. Ricardo is a 20-year-old white cisgender man, resident of Meyer, and social science student. I asked, "Did you have English classes in school?" He said yes. And what was those classes like? Him. Wow, at school the classes were always very weak. At a level, you always have the same subject every year. So it's always the verb to be, past, present, and things repeating itself. It is very common and everybody's introverted. And he said, "And was this school?" I said, "Was this school public or private?" He said, "Private." "Did you take any courses outside of school?" He said, "Yes." "And what were the teaching materials used in those two environments like?" And he said, "Wow, there was always a huge discrepancy. The school material was always very superficial, very shallow, and a little content. But English course was always very complete and one of those renowned courses, you know? So it was very good, full of content." Despite having studied at a private school, which at first makes us think that his education would be superior to that one found in public schools, he gives the report extremely similar to that of others, a school where English teaching is weak or non existent. Victoria, a 19-year-old cisgender woman of mixed race, she identified herself as Parda, resident of Taquara and a social science student, had an opinion on that. I asked her, "Did you have English in school?" She said, "Yes." "And what were those classes like?" She said, "They were basic, just to learn the simplest phrases possible, verb concepts, that kind of thing." And Victoria didn't take any external courses. I asked her, "What kind of teaching materials did you use in your classes?" She said, "In previous years we had books. Last year we also had books, but we didn't use them. We just talked about anything the whole hour." Caio, a 20-year-old cisgender black man, resident of Campo Grande and a mechanical engineering student, was, "Did you have English at school?" He said, "I did until the ninth grade elementary school." I asked, "What were those classes like for you?" He said, "Oh, most of them were very repetitive. Mostly to be, referring to the verb to be again, and more basic things. And that was throughout the entire school year, during the whole school period." Well, English classes carry a terrible stigma of being indispensable, with many classes described as repetitive, meaningless, ignorable, or simply not existing. When compared to other subjects, foreign language classes are perceived as lacking seriousness or purpose. Why does this happen? Our interviewers reported that the majority of the classes were redundant, always covering the same content, led by a teaching method that relied heavily on writing and did not directly engage it with the student's mind. That's really interesting. In an attempt to find a solution, we asked them how they thought an English class should function. Well, Ricardo said, okay, well, an English class has to be that didactic and English has to be used because I think there are many schools where students don't use English in class. They learn very little, but they don't use it so much that, no, it's that. Walter, a 24-year-old cisgender black man, resident of Indianapolis and a social sciences student, said, "I think English classes should work through dialogue, teaching everyday things, how to talk to others, how to identify them, how to approach them, how to say thank you. Everyday things, you know. In terms of teaching methods, audiovisual resources, I think it helps a lot." Larissa, a 20-year-old cisgender white woman living in the city center and studying geography, said, I think an English class should basically be a conversation. Not only that, but 80% of the class should be conversational. Because we end up being hesitant to practice and speak English because we don't have much practice in conversating in English. I think teachers should spend almost 100% of their classes in English, obviously studying grammar, but trying to relate it to aspects of our lives. We see in those words that teachers and classes do not speak with their students. It's not related to their life. It seems that their teaching methods is not to approach place of communication, such as Walter proposes. Like we should learn better things, how they're important things to have a communication and a sense of relationship. Well, Larissa comes to us saying that she thinks the exposure to the language should be important thing for us to see things different from verb to be, colors, animals, verbs that we are already saturated from seeing. It's very common to hear reports of embarrassment in classrooms, whether it's trying to speak English and being criticized for not having a native pronunciation, or the fear of making mistakes, which hinders learning as it's an essential part of development. These attitudes coming from teachers or environments that allow other students to practice this intimidation are part of the reason for the high level of anxiety in learning within the classroom. Some strategies we can develop to help classes are creating a safe and friendly environment, somewhere where our students can speak about the anxiety, the learning process of another language um, happens inside of them. Somewhere where you won't be bullied for trying to speak or trying to improve your learning. Developing students' confidence to make mistakes without interrupting them or making it clear that they were wrong, such thing as adopting um, denying posture or writing on a diary and speaking out loud about a mistake that a specifically person knows that was made for them. Using communicative activities to make them feel more secure interpreting another language. Because when we are speaking another language, we are performing another vocabulary. We are learning, we are translating, we are creating everything inside our minds. And when we are not exercising it, it's hard for us to do it outside or even to learn to write to everything. It's important for us to make a communicative environment, such as Larissa said in her report. Like, I think English class should basically be a conversation. There's not conversation in our classes. There's no dialogue, such as Walter says. And they learn, but they don't use it, just like Ricardo said. We should also avoid using native speaker pronunciation as a model. Uh, there are a lot of people, even in my everyday life, who are ashamed of speaking English because they think their accent is shameful, is something to be ashamed of. And this is really sad because we should not be afraid of speaking, since we are already making an effort to speak something else beside our nature language. And we are not less because we do not speak a pronunciation of the natives. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching to the end. My name is Sofia Nobri, and this was my presentation about the learning process of English in Brazilian schools. Thank you very much.